Welcome to What's in a Word, and this time it's What's in a Word on sports and games, and we've come to Mottram Hall near Wilmslow in Cheshire, and I've brought all my golfing gear, because we're bound to be doing golf, because there's loads of history in golf. Now, I've been having a look through the script. I haven't actually come across golf yet, but I know it will turn up eventually. We're doing cricket, first of all, which... well, the first recorded mention of it was back in 1300, Edward I, and it was a game played by women. And it was referred to as either stool ball or club ball. Let's deal with stool ball first. The women would bring a stool out of the house, place it, and you threw a ball at it. And you had to keep the ball away with your hands. Now, you had little milking stools, but you also had a taller stool, which had a hole in the top. And that's the one you sat on when you went to the toilet, with a sort of chamber pot underneath. And that's why, when you go to the doctors today, if you're particularly unfortunate, the doctor might ask you for a stool. Then, club ball came along. Now, either of these could have been the origin of cricket, but that's where you actually used a piece of wood to hit the ball. It was a kind of staff, which was known as a crick. Cricket. Now, what about the stumps? They were literally tree stumps. That's why they're called stumps. But on the South Downs, the shepherds there, they didn't have any tree stumps because there were no trees growing. So they would use part of a lambing pen. Now, the front part of a lambing pen, a gate, is known as a wicket. And the top part, which is an adjustable piece of wood, was known as the bail. And that's where you get bails and wicket from. So is he my props man then? Great. I know, we're doing cricket, but the lad thinks he's going to play for England, so I thought I'd help him out and give him a bit of practice in nets. I wasn't quite ready for that one, but I'll have another go in a second. Now, some more cricketing terms for you. What about an umpire? Well, it comes from the French numpère, which was someone who used to adjudicate over the game. We changed it to a numpire, and then we dropped the num, and it became an umpire. Overs? Well, that was another one. Bit harder if you can, because you're not really testing me. You changed over batsman. And that's... see? That's where overs comes from. And bats? Well, bats were all sorts of different sizes. You could have whatever size you liked, whatever suited you. You could have one as big as a barn door if you wanted to. If you could wield it, that is. And I was talking about women playing cricket before. Well, all sorts of people started... It's a bit wet. It's the grass. All sorts of people started to play cricket. I'm talking of social classes. If there was someone who was worthy of respect, you took your hat off to them. Hat off to them. That's where toff comes from. And one toff who was definitely associated with the game of cricket was one Thomas Lord. Now, the MCC played on a bit of land that was owned by Thomas Lord, and they moved to another bit of land that was also owned by him, and they took the turf with them. And they took his name as well. They called it Lords. And the oval? Well, the oval... Just carry on. The oval was a patch of land that was owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. And planning permission was put before Parliament to turn it into something else. Build on it, basically. But the Prince Consort, Prince Albert, said, no, you're not building on that land. In fact, that land will remain as a cricket club for as long as the people of London wish it to be so. And that's why the Oval is where it is today. You know, have you heard the expression upstaging someone? It's when you get in front of the main turn. Go and get me some cricketing props, will you? Now, why is a cricket pitch 22 yards long? Well, that goes back to farming. Everything seems to go back to agriculture. An acre is 220 yards by 22 yards. 66 feet, or a chain to be precise. Scoring. Well, your runs used to be notched onto a piece of wood, and it was scoring it into the wood. And that's where scoring comes from. If you hadn't scored anything, the wood was virginal, and an over would become a virgin, which was later changed to a maiden over. When they started writing it down, if you'd scored nothing, they would put a circle, but it was sort of shaped like a duck's egg. A duck egg, which later became out for a duck. And, thank you, take that. If you were out twice for a duck, you had two circles like that next to one another, which look like spectacles. And that's where we get making a spectacle of yourself from. Now, that was underarm. Actually, I'll tell you about that in a bit, but everything was underarm up until 1835. And if a bowler bowled someone out, and then bowled another one out, and then bowled another one out, the club would buy him a new hat, or they would pass a hat round the audience. And that's where we get a hat trick from. Oh, there we go. 1774, they made the wicket higher, and it had just the two in it. And then in 1775, they added the middle one. Cricket. Come on, do your best. Fantastic. Now I get to play a little bit of golf. And still doing cricket. Right, okay then. What about the ball itself? Do you know it used to be leather with quills stuffed inside it? Quills from pens stuffed in. And then it changed to corkies, hitting a corker. Bowling. 1835. Women used to bowl underarm. It's mainly women that played the game. Underarm. But they wore big, frilly skirts and they got in the way. So they started bowling round arm. Like that. And then the men came into the game and started bowling overarm. Like that. They got pretty good at the game. Women dropped out of the game and started to make the tea. Right. I'll bowl to him. There we go. Of course, if you can't bowl him out, and I probably can't, you can always stump him. Wicket-keeper might stump you. And that's why we have, I'm stumped, if I know that expression. And if you just miss the wickets, you're missing it by a cat's whisker, or by the skin of your teeth, or by a lick of paint. All expressions that came from cricket. See if I can do another one. Oh! Yeah, alright, so it was a bit wide. That's all. Stop barracking me. That's interesting. That came from Melbourne in Australia. Blokes playing football. There was an army barracks nearby and the soldiers used to shout abuse at the people playing football and it became known as barracking. But you don't have it in cricket because that's simply just not cricket. And that's not playing by the rules. More cricketing expressions. And as for the Ashes, 1882, England playing Australia, England lost. And the Sporting Times wrote that the body of English cricket would be burnt and the ashes taken to Australia. 1883, the Australians lost to the English. And as a bit of a joke, they burnt the wickets and the bails and they gave the ashes to the English in an urn. Kept at Lord's ever since. Playing for the Ashes. Yeah, well, I've no chance. I'll stick with my golf. Oh, no. Can't I just have a little knock with my golf clubs instead of talking about all these other sports? All right, tennis. Played on a tennis court. Why? Because the noblemen, the rich that played it, they played it in courtyards. Courtyards were surrounded by roofs, sloping roofs like this, that you could actually play off. It was part of the pitch. Which is why tennis courts have the tram lines down the side now, representing the roofs. Go on then. served to me, I'll probably end up getting nothing, which of course is love. And that's because when you write down nothing, it looks like an egg. The French for egg, earth, l'earth became love. Over that side this time. There you go. Right, other games. Hockey came from an Irish game called banty, knocking the ball backwards and forwards. Bandying about. Pall-mall. If you're running around all over the place, you're pell-melling about. It was actually a game played on an 800-yard-long alley that, I'll serve, that had a sort of hoop at the end. And the winner of the game was the person who knocked it through the hoop in the least number of shots. And they played it just in front of Buckingham Palace, which is why that road is still known today as Pall Mall. And finally, lacrosse comes from a French missionary who was teaching some Native Americans about Christianity, and he also taught them to play a game which he played with his shepherd's crook. And the French for the shepherd's crook is literally lacrosse. Come here. You've been cheating. You were throwing it. There's only one racket for me, the governor. Clever clogs. Mind you, I don't know where that comes from. And if you know, you could perhaps let me know. Well, it can get a bit sweaty playing tennis. No, the reason I'm wearing this is to tell you about archery. Archers used to wear these, and if they were in battle, firing away, and the string broke on their bow, they would have a spare one under here, keeping dry and nice and flexible, hence having another string to your bow. Winston Churchill used to do that, V for victory. You do it the other way around, it becomes a little bit ruder, and that's because the English yeomen used to do it to the French, to say, you haven't caught me, and cut off my 2 fingers. Skittles used to be played in a pub, nice flat area, and if you had beer and you had skittles, you could have a life of beer and skittles. That's what the expression means, where it comes from. They had 9 pins. One of the pins was bigger. That was the king pin, which is why if you're good at something, you are the king pin. And it was so popular in America that they started playing it on Sundays. They brought out a law to ban that, and they got round the law by adding an extra pin. 10-pin bowling. Now, darts, they used to be little arrows. In fact, in pubs, you'll still get people saying, you fancy a game of arrows? And they used to throw them into the end of a beer barrel, which is why we have that shape of board, only we have colours now and not grooves. Is there anything you can't do? Take me to the first tee. That would be useful. Hey, I'm on the green and I've lost my marbles. Losing your marble. Marbles, they're interesting. You see, they used to make statues out of marble, and the kids used to take chippings from the statues, and they'd round them up and play games with them. And that's why they became known as marbles. Unless they were made out of alabaster, and then they were alleys. Now, on to a much bigger marble, a man's marble. Bowls. Only played by the gentry, because you couldn't play unless you weren't over £100 a year. That was because too many people would stop practicing their archery. I'm off to practice my golf now. I've finally got to get on the golf course. What are you doing here? Of course I know about clothing etiquette. You've got to have the right shoes, you can't wear jeans, and you've got to have a shirt with a collar on it. If you want to know more, website details along the bottom. Clever clogs.
Comedy to die for. Next on 4, Alec Guinness and Peter Sellers are thick as thieves as they plan the perfect murder that goes horribly wrong in The Lady Killers.